Hello everyone, and welcome back to session 12 of Pixopalooza. I'm glad to see that so many of you have decided to join us for yet another exciting web seminar. We hope that you're all staying healthy, and more importantly, staying inside. Today, we are going to talk with all of you about Pixotope Mobile, using lightweight and portable hardware for an easily manageable kit that you can take with you on the road. In short, Pixotope Mobile is an incredibly compact and portable mixed reality solution. Helping us facilitate this is a very interesting new camera that we are going to take a closer look at, the AWUE 150 PTZ, created and supplied by our friends over at Panasonic, who are going to be joining us later today, together with some of our other friends over at MoSys. These guest speakers will be talking about their respective products and technologies later on, and how these can help you kick off your next virtual production. Sorry about that. Before we move on, my name is Frank Daniel Moen Vedvik. I've been working at the Future Group for the past 3 years or so as a senior product specialist, which mainly means I've been traveling all over the world, helping streamline productions and bring shows on air, actually with quite a few of you in the audience. Something I've been enjoying greatly. But as we all know, it's not really the time to be flying all over the globe these days, which is why we have to meet up in this web seminar instead. Now, I do see that we have more than just a few new faces in the crowd today. So I feel that before we move on too far and hand over the presenter seat to Panasonic and MoSys, we need to start with a brief overview of Pixotope as a solution. Just so we all know what Pixotope is, how it works, how we can use it, and what it can give you in terms of visual fidelity for your next virtual production. Please note that for today, we are just going to skim through the software. If you wish to see a more paced and detailed walkthrough of Pixotope and all its different features, keep in mind that you do, and at least you should, have full access to all the recordings of our previous Pixopalooza sessions. So if you haven't seen them yet, we strongly recommend that you take a look at them at some point after this webinar. So to begin, let's do a quick summary of what Pixotope is. Let's take a look at it and see what it actually looks like, for those of you turning in for the first time. So I'm just going to go ahead and open Directory here. Let's bring it over to our main screen. So Pixotope is, as we just mentioned, a virtual production solution built on Epic's real-time render engine, Unreal Engine 4. It is not a plugin, but a full custom build of the engine with far-reaching benefits and implications. Pixotope is split into two main segments. We have the Pixotope Director, which we are currently looking at, which acts as both the launchpad, where you'll find all the different projects. It is also where your technical engineers will do all their technical setup, the signal routing, the network configuration, and so on. And it is also where the operator will be spending pretty much all of his or her time in the production tab, dealing with object manipulation, using and interacting with control panels, handling and dealing with our composite in terms of adding post-process effects or grading colors and fine-tuning the overall values of your final image, as well as dealing with our proprietary state-of-the-art software chroma keyer. So let's also take a look at the Pixotope editor, which is our custom version of Unreal. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into scene here, launch in editor. Notice that we of course have the option to launch either live or in editor, but there is really not too much of a difference between these, because as we're going to see in a few seconds, in many ways within Pixotope, you are always live. The workflow in Pixotope is incredibly iterative, fast-paced, and efficient. Now that we in a second are going to have a new feed up at my right-hand side, you'll be able to see that despite me now literally just having fired up the editor, we are still producing a live, real-time final composite output, as we can see. This is using tracked camera data and going out on SDI. So this means that we can be working in the editor adding geometries, manipulating our scene, and we can see the final output going to a bus or a master control room or something similar in real time. We can even see that here, if I am to open the control interface for our Panasonic camera, this is just going to be a sneak peek. We are going to be spending a lot more time on this later. And you can see we're seeing at the far side. You can see that as I manipulate my camera, we can see that our graphics are changing in real time because the tracking is being applied despite us not being in what we would call live mode. So for those of you that have seen the Unreal interface before, or even better, have done any work in Unreal, this editor is going to be immediately very familiar. The Pixotope editor is very similar to the native standard Unreal interface, which is a conscious choice. We try to keep parity as much as possible, allowing people that have Unreal experience to sit down and be productive in Pixotope from day one. It also means that learning Pixotope is mainly going to mean learning Unreal, which means you can draw upon the vast amount of materials, resources, and asset libraries developed by some of the world's 7 or 8 million active Unreal developers and artists. So with Pixotope, you get direct access into an incredibly vast, dynamic, and powerful ecosystem. Now, this scene we are looking at right here, right now, is a reconstruction, photogrammetry-heavy reconstruction of our office neighborhood here in Nydalen, Oslo, Norway. The reason we like showing this off is because it showcases just how vibrant and dynamic your virtual sets can be. Of course, you can have virtual sets that look like real sets, but you can also do a lot more. Notice here that we have dynamic reflections, we have the rippling river streaming along. We can see individual insects and bugs buzzing around. We can see that wind is moving and animating foliage. This is not just a very expensive static 3D backdrop or a matte painting. This is actually a fully vibrant, interactive, rendered world. If I were to simulate this, we can even see that animals start populating the scene and drift around. Let's get rid of our debug text so we can enjoy this in full fidelity. And again, none of this light is baked. This is all lit in real time dynamically. To showcase this, because again, showing is a lot more than just telling, we can grab hold of our sunlight and simply pivot it around if we wish to have a slightly different time of day. And notice that in doing so, the entire light scenario in the scene changes on the fly at a very comfortable 50 FPS. And we can, of course, do more than just adjust lighting. We can also adjust materials, we can move objects, we can trigger camera movements, all kinds of animations, pipe in video. We can do pretty much anything we would like to do. More than anything, Pixotope offers unparalleled creative freedom. Notice here that if you look at our output while I navigate to my control panel in the Pixotope director, I can also trigger large-scale environmental changes, like for instance, bringing in a setting that is something that more people are going to connect to when they think of Norway. Notice how we are dynamically changing every surface. We are tinting objects, changing the sky in order to have a completely different look and feel to the environment. And these weather changes can be made on the fly just by using very easy to program, very easy to manipulate control panel buttons. I can also go ahead and take the snow out. I can bring in something that is more of a fall theme, but really showcases the visual fidelity you can achieve. Notice that we are spawning particle effects. We are adjusting our overall color composite to get something quite visually impressive. That's a bit dark, so we could, of course, at this point, jump into our production tab, color grading, and simply adjust our 3D graphics to bring up the luminance a bit. Notice that we can, of course, adjust our 3D graphics, our video separately, so we can easily adjust the gamma, saturation, and color temperature of our video to fit with our graphical background, for instance, and we can do a final adjustment pass on our final output. We can, of course, use Pixotope for more traditional virtual sets as well. So we can easily jump to our content browser and simply switch to a different level. So here I'm going to jump into our Pixotope Virtual Studio. And it also, of course, goes without saying that Pixotope can be used for more than just virtual sets. It can also be used for any kind of mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, and anything in between or any combination thereof. Here, of course, we have an example of yet another virtual set. This is more akin to what most of you expect a virtual set to look like, but again, with incredible visual fidelity. And keep in mind that this is not actively using NVIDIA RTX, as the machine we are running this on currently is running a meager 1080 GTX graphics card instead. But if you would like to see how this could look with actual ray tracing and visual fidelity pulled to the max, there is a previous Pixopalooza session where we go through this in great excruciating detail, which is strongly recommended to take a look at. And again, just for completion's sake, this is yet another scene that we can change and deal with on the fly. As we can see, every surface, every parameter, everything can be changed, tweaked, and animated with the push of a button. On that note, we've now gotten a pretty good introduction into Pixotope, what Pixotope is and how it looks. And the next thing we would like to talk about is Pixotope Mobile, showcasing how we can take this with us on the go in a very compact package. But before we do that, I would like to invite our dear friend Jomi from Panasonic to step up to the speaker's chair and take over and talk briefly, well, not so briefly, about their exciting new lineup of cameras. So Jomi, I'm going to hand over to you.
Hi, Frank. Thank you. So yeah, thank you for this invitation to join the Pixopalooza series of webinars. I'm glad to explain today the integration of our cameras with Pixotope. And yeah, this story started with the UE150. That was the first PTZ camera that provided tracking data. It means that the camera provides pan, tilt, zoom, focus, iris information in real time, in synchronization, and it does in a standard protocol, which is 3D. And it means that the camera can be directly used by augmented reality or virtual reality systems like Pixotope. But not only that, also the camera can be used with tracking systems like StarTracker from MoSys, as we will see also today. And recently we announced a second camera that will be having this same functionality. It's the UE100, which will be available in September. And yeah, this camera will also support this tracking data function. So let me just very briefly tell you a bit more about these two cameras. The UE150, which is the camera that you have next to you right now, but also the 100, we're talking about 4K PTZ cameras supporting 2160 50p, so it means that both cameras can be used for broadcast. So the frame rate is 50. Also, other frame rates are supported as well. The camera has a good balance between zoom and wide angle of view. So we can use the camera in really far and make use of the optical zoom 20 times in case of the 150, 24 in case of the 100. But also we can put the camera really close to the action, really close to the talent. And thanks to this wider angle of view, so no need for external converters. I think the camera now offers both possibilities in a really integrated way. This is an integrated PTZ camera. It means that the camera, the lens, and the pan tilt mechanism is all in one body. And basically all cameras are almost the same. So it's easy to produce a calibration file or lens file or preset as you have in your interface. So we can recall that file, that configuration, and then the calibration of the camera is almost a matter of minutes. So no worries in that sense. The cameras are 4K, but it's also quite flexible to work in HD simultaneously. So you can choose simultaneous outputs, 4K and HD. And especially the UE150 has a couple of functions in 4K. It's HDR and a VLOC that Pixotope is also using. So thanks to these two functions in the camera, the quality, the render is much better because you take the signal with more dynamic range and, let's say, more closer to the sensor. So these two functions, for example, is a good advantage for when using Pixotope. You are showing the control of the camera from the web browser. It's fine. From the web browser, you can move the camera and you can recall some presets. It's quite convenient. But okay, for live movement, for on-air movements, you can also control the camera from a control panel with a joystick. For example, I put here one of our controllers, the RP150, which is quite convenient for, especially if you have to play with the camera while the camera is on air. Let me go back a bit in time. I like these pictures because it refers to the time that I joined Panasonic almost 20 years ago. And I remember when I first visited some TV stations, I saw the Panasonic panel heads surrounded by these gears, these external cables and encoders to make our panel heads compatible with virtual applications. So, well, everything evolves, and now this is what we have inside the camera. So now this tracking data comes from the encoders of the PTZ. It's just a function in the menu. So yeah, I think the picture speaks by itself. How easy has this setup become? One nice way of creating good content is by adding graphics or by using virtual backgrounds, as Frank started to show before. This is an excellent way of producing very nice pictures. But if we talk a little bit more about the camera itself, of course, the camera has this pan and tilt movement, but if you move the camera around, either on a jeep or a crane or on a dolly or also vertically, what you create is something much nicer. You will create these beauty shots. That's something that you cannot create when the camera is just on a tripod. It's not possible only with the pan and tilt. So for that, we have good partners. We have MoSys with the StarTracker module for these two cameras, for the 150, but also with the 100. And they will explain in detail, but one consequence of using StarTracker is that, for example, you can use the camera on a Jeep and have these crane like movements, which is also a good way of improving the pictures. But also we have the tuning system. It's a system based on motorized dollies and columns made for the Panasonic PTZs. And this is there are many configurations in that sense. Here you see an example in a music concert, how the camera is placed on a totem. It's a motorized column. But the good thing with these systems, with the dollies, the columns, the jeeps, is that we don't lose that simplicity of the setup when using the camera for AR or VR. It still gets one single stream of tracking data, which goes directly to Pixotope, for instance, and then you still have that quick setup and that a quick adjustment. So it's also a nice integration. Let me just put a couple of examples of this balance between a good zoom and a wider angle of video. So in case of the big zoom, it's no problem to have the camera really in the back and still get a nice close-up of the talent of the singer or the guitar player in that case. So we have 24 times or 20 times depending on the model, but it's still quite good. And also we have additional zoom functions and that even extends a bit this zoom range. But also on the other side, you see the camera mounted on a dolly in a table. So the camera is like 1 meter away from the talent, from the people talking around the table. That was an election program in Barcelona some months ago. And as you can see, we still can have a nice shot, not only of one face, we can have 2, even 3 people in the same shot. No distortion, there is no geometric aberration in that sense, no GoPro effect. So really nice. And yeah, in that case, it's an example of how that system could have been combined with graphics. You know, in the elections, the graphics is mandatory to put some results. Let me put you also another example of a test we did some months ago. We tested the camera in a football stadium, in FC Barcelona stadium, and the camera was tested as a master camera. And in that sense, I can tell you 2 things. Basically, like the picture quality of the UE150 is really high. So really, you can think in camera for applications like that. And also the zoom range. The zoom is also for this use as master camera. The camera was performing quite well. But the reason also to put these pictures is, unfortunately, we have to get used to these empty stadiums from now on probably for the rest of the year. So, well, there is a chance to transform the stadiums into a virtual application. So using the technology, using the augmented reality, for example, to transform the empty seats in something more nice. Like, for example, this as an idea, this is just crossed my mind. Like, okay, let's thought in have some animations in the empty seats, something that's the football production a bit more interesting than not these empty places and a bit silent. So I know that there are rumors in that, there are some investigations on that sense, how to use the technology to overcome that restrictions that we have now because of the COVID. But not only the football, so more and more these live events are adopting the augmented reality, music concert, live performance, e-sports, of course. And in that sense, a mobile solution like Pixotope is presenting today, it's a good combination because this mobile workstation or even PC combined with the PTZ, it means that we can set up the system in a relatively short amount of time, be quick with the setup, be quick with the calibration, and really in this way create nice content without all the headaches and all the limitations that we have some years ago for that. So thank you for that. I'll be here in the Q&A session, ready for your questions. So now I give it back to Frank.
Thank you, Jomi, for that very enlightening, in-depth session. Now that we've got a more in-depth look at the history and alternatives to this particular camera, we can see that a lot of possibilities start to open up. As Jomi pointed out, for instance, combined with a portable machine like a laptop and an external Aja input device, we could have an entire mixed reality setup fitting in a backpack. Great for makeshift or on-site productions. All the tracking is packed with the camera. all the video I/O and all the control needs or the operator needs will be handled by the laptop itself. So there's not really much need for any other elements. At the end of the day, this is all you need to give you a final SDI output feed, which is quite spectacular. Now, this, of course, is a schematic of how something like this could look, but we actually have a example up and running right here in our studio. So my colleague Magnus is going to give us a video feed where we can take a look at what we have running. On the right-hand side, we can, of course, see the actual AWUE150 PTC itself, which can be controlled through interface. It is a quite beautiful, sleek little thing. It has a full 360 degrees of navigational freedom. It is able to output both HDR, Vlog, as well as up to 4K resolution. So it really is quite spectacular. The zoom is quite potent, as well as the focus. Let's all say hello to Magnus over here. Let's get a closer look. There's, of course, external control devices as well, but you don't necessarily need them. You can get quite far with just a browser-based solution in by itself. Very nice. Oh, very good. Now, the next device we need is, of course, a way to take the video feed from our camera and input it into our computer, our laptop. So here over to the side, we can see that we have an external input-output device provided by Aja. This is the IO 4K external, is that a full name? I believe that's a full name. This is the Aja IO 4K. It allows taking in and outputting up to 4 spigots, I believe, up to 4K. And it is quite compact, quite robust. And from our test, it seems to generally give us very, very good video feeds. It also seems more robust to handling interference in your feeds, more so than the internal cards, which is extra useful in sort of haphazard on-site productions where things can get a bit messy. The last device we have here over the far side is, of course, a high-end 17-inch MSI gaming laptop, which receives the video feeds through Thunderbolt 3. And on this machine is where we will be running Pixotope together with the browser-based camera control interface, basically giving us a full virtual production solution in a very, very compact package. So this is more or less all you have to set up, all the cables you have to pull in order to be able to start producing pixels. But what about the technical setup? Well, let's take a look at that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and recenter my camera here. And then we are going to take a look at some graphics. Now we're going to see a live output from Pixotope here. And we are going to go ahead and look at how we have to set this up from scratch. So here we can see that we have Dot waiting patiently on the front chair in an AR scene. We can see, of course, that right off the bat, there are some issues with our color and grading, which we're going to get to in a second. But of course, we already have tracking up and running. So we've already done some setup. Let's actually wipe all that and start from scratch, just so we can kind of walk through the process of what you would have to do to get this up and running in a new project on site. So the first thing we're going to do is delete our camera setup, which is going to kill our routing, it's going to kill our camera feed, and as you can see, we now lost video in our output. Let me full screen this so we can all get a better view. I'm also going to hit Control+ a few times just to make this a bit bigger. So the first thing we're going to do is add a camera system. We're just going to call this Panasonic. Very good. We don't really have to worry too much about setting the camera type and the lens. This is mainly relevant for the film back and the depth of field settings for the camera, mainly the intensity of the depth of field or defocus effect. It's more critical for extreme telelenses. It's not so important for something we're going to set up in-house. So we're just going to leave this as is. We're going to move on to tracking. We do, of course, within Pixotope support all the large tracking solutions on the market. We also support the more open 3D protocol, which is used by quite a few tracking vendors, but also by a few more avant-garde tracking solutions. We are for now going to be using the 3D protocol and the lens file to decode the data received from the PTC. But later on, our friends over at MoSys is going to show us how we could integrate their gorgeous StarTracker into this ecosystem to add an extra level of freedom in our camera movement. Very exciting stuff, but we're not quite there yet. So for now, let's stick with 3D. The next thing we're going to do is ensure that we are able to receive the data. We already have our network set up. We have a data hub, which passes messages between our director and our editor. And we have a camera tracking server, which simply is a service that runs on each render engine that receives tracking data. We can see we have one running on this machine. So all we really need to do is underneath tracking, we need to tell this camera that we just created to receive on this machine, which has this IP address, the tracking data on this specific port, which is dictated in the Panasonic web interface. And you can see the moment we have this filled in, we can see that data is ticking in, which means at this point we have tracking data. Then we simply need to route our signal. If we were to jump into the setup panel for the Panasonic camera, we can see that the actual feed that we are outputting is 1080 50p. So let's go ahead and just set that up here. We are expecting to receive not 1080i at 5954, but 1080 50p. Of course, both the AWUE150 as well as Pixotope is able to use both progressive and interlaced, and we also support taking in all the way up to 4K feeds. The color space. Now we did see that earlier that our video was looking a bit harsh. That was because we were simply doing a non-physically correct composite. We were not compositing in linear space and we were not taking in vlog, which would give us a higher dynamic range. So let's actually go ahead and set that up now. Instead of receiving sort of the plain old Rec 709, we are going to scroll down here in our color spaces all the way down to, oh, that's a bit too far. Here we go, Panasonic. We're going to reserve vlog v gamut. The camera is not going to be a green screen camera. We don't have a green screen here. We are in the front of our home office here in Norway. So we're going to change the input type to input camera. Then we're going to go to routing. We need to add an input. We created the camera, so we simply select the camera and say that, hey, I want to receive this feed on my input spigot 1. And as soon as I assign that, we can see over my side, we now have our feed coming in. Because I forgot to delete my output, so we already had output set on spigot 3 and 4 on our Aja card. And just like that, we are now up and running. That was the basic setup. And at this point, if I start manipulating my camera, we're going to see that tracking is working more or less as intended. So we can see that we also do have some issues. We can see that things are sliding a lot. We can see that our AR character is hovering in air. And we can see that pulling zoom, for instance, doesn't quite give us the results we are expecting. This is because of the fact that we are receiving encoder data. We are receiving numeric values for the zoom and the focus on the camera, which means that we need a lens file to actually be able to convert those numeric values into values that make sense in terms of defocus intensity as well as horizontal field of view. All of this can be done within the director. The fact that the camera is hovering in the fact that our character is hovering in the air as well makes sense when you think about it. A PTZ will not feed us its three-dimensional position. It's going to feed us roll, tilt, zoom, focus, as well as the pan. Well, not roll. Don't understand. It's a pan, tilt, zoom camera. Sorry about that. It's going to feed us pan, tilt, zoom, and focus. So we are going to go back to tracking because we have some more adjustments to make. First of all, we're going to enable a lens file that we already calibrated. We have quite a few here. We've been doing some R&D, but we're just going to go ahead and stick with Panasonic Dev2 CTS. Very good. Then we need to set the actual range for the encoder values. This can easily be done by just going into Unreal in the edit, so going into Pixotope in the editor and pull your physical camera zoom all the way out, as well as focus all the way out. Then you can select your track camera, read the values, input them here, and then we can go all the other way around to read the minimum values. Now we want to keep this at a fairly steady pace, so I'm just going to copy the values I already have noted down here. So it's going to be 1365, 4095, 4095, 1365. Excellent. And the last thing we're going to do is add a camera mount, because we actually do have a camera mount, a table. So our tripod is a table, and the height of our table is 95 centimeters. The moment I type that in, you can see that dot snapped beautifully to the couch it's supposed to be sitting on. And now we can see that if I try to start zooming and panning again, so we can go back into our browser-based interface. So you can see now that as I pan around, things are sticking beautifully. We don't even have to worry about sync. We seem to have gotten lucky with linking up our video and our graphics. And if I were to pull zoom, we can see that this sticks quite nicely. Let's go ahead and tilt up and pull focus as well. So focus, zoom, pan and tilt, everything seems to be in order. Very nice. All right. So the last thing we're going to want to do is harness the power of Vlog within this camera. Because we can see here that things are looking a bit flat and burned out. We can see that we have the windows behind us, which are burned to white. We can see that we have a bit too much harsh black fields as well. So let's go into the setup panel of our Panasonic camera. Let's move on to image adjust. Sorry, let's move on to system. Basic system. We are going to go to color settings and we're going to go ahead and enable Vlog. The moment we set that, we can see that now we are receiving a Vlog feed. Well, actually, this doesn't look quite like what we were expecting. And that is because here underneath Pixotope, production, composite, we are not compositing in linear space, which of course we have to be if we are going to be utilizing color management and high dynamic range. So let's go ahead and change to linear space. We're going to give the render engine a minute to update. And now we can see that we suddenly have almost a bit too much vibrancy in our scene, and things are looking a bit more in order. Now we're going to go to setup. We're going to go to video input output. And we are going to simply apply a shaper to our output because I feel that some of these whites are a bit too harsh and aggressive. So we're going to apply a Rec 7 shaper. Give it a second to update. And just like that, we got rid of some of the oversaturations in our highlights. And we now have a much, much, much more well-balanced image than you could ever hope to achieve if you were not working within linear space. And then just to wrap this up, we can, of course, as we mentioned earlier, do some quick color grading and adjustments to bring things sort of into a believable cohesive space. We can see that our backdrop is a bit blue. We can see here that it doesn't really look nice having a very blue backdrop behind us. So let's just move on to video. We can enable white balance. And by simply pulling this, we can bring some warmth back into our office space. That was actually very aggressive. Let's just be a bit subtle about that, and then we can enable color grading and selectively go into our saturation and simply desaturate our blues a little bit. Let's not be too aggressive about that. I think I am pretty happy with what we have now. The next thing I want to do is bring up the contrast or gain up my graphics a little bit. So we're just going to go to 3D graphics. Oh, I'm getting a note here just to double check my output here in the Panasonic camera. Because the Panasonic camera supports multiple forms for output as well. So if you go to System, Color Settings, and then check our output, we can see that we can choose either Vlog or V709, and we definitely want to make sure that we are using Vlog in our output. Otherwise, the conversion is going to be a bit strange. Okay, so back into Director. We now wish to tweak our graphics a bit. Maybe we would like to take down the green saturation just a smidge, bring up the gamma, just to sort of have the values look more cohesive, and maybe fine tune our contrast to just fill in some of those shadows. We could, of course, dive into a scene and start adjusting our graphics, but it's much faster to be able to just adjust this on the fly directly from our operator interfaces, which also necessitates absolutely zero Unreal experience. There we go. All right. So now we've seen how we can set up Pixotope Mobile. We've seen how we can operate it without ever having to get up out of our chairs. Very comfortable to be an operator these days. But we can also see some limitations. We can pan, tilt, and zoom, which is great, especially for certain types of broadcasts, like off-field sports broadcasts and any kind of concert where you want to have cameras up in the tribunes or up among the audience. But what if you want to bring your camera closer? What if you want to be able to dolly around? What if you want to attach it to the back of a Steadicam operator and maneuver freely around within your environment? What then? Well, luckily, our friends over at MoSys has a solution for exactly that. MoSys has been a good partner of ours for quite a few years. Some of our first tracking equipment was actually provided by MoSys, and I'm very excited to be able to invite them now to take over the presentation chair and talk more about how you can integrate the MoSys StarTracker into this highly compact mobile PTZ kit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to MoSys, to the MoSys Experimental Virtual Production Lab. And thank you very much, Frank, for hosting us and giving that fantastic introduction to what you can do with a Pixotope system, as well as what you can do. And Xiaoma, thank you very much for telling us all about the Panasonic UE150 head. Xiaoma, I think we just had the honor working with you a week ago, where we launched the StarTracker UE150 jointly. Now, before we get to the StarTracker UE150 and showing, why do we actually need that? What does it bring us? I would like to, first quickly say something about MoSys. And so MoSys is all about camera robotics, camera motion, either tracked or robotically achieved. And it's very exciting, especially now, which is for some people maybe a sad time, but what we experience now in the virtual production and robotics is quite amazing due to Corona. So we have quite a lot of solutions for remote camera control. If you can't travel anymore, if you can't travel to another continent, we have TimeCam, what we will launch very, very, very soon, which compensates for the time difference between continents and stuff like that, or control cameras over the internet. And we will introduce a lot more in our own webinars. But now let's talk about StarTracker and the StarTracker for the UE150. MoSys started to work in, I think, camera tracking like 16 years ago. When we were 2004, we already had, together with Panasonic, a encoding kit for the Panasonic PH300. So there is a long history of working together. And then 9-10 years ago, we actually started working on the StarTracker, which is now, I think, in more than, I don't know, 50 or 100 studios in more than 50 countries. And it's became like an industry standard. And I would like to introduce to Martin, who is the co-inventor, and explain to you what the strength of the StarTracker is and where it comes from. And then I will go later back in the studio and show you what we can do with the UE150 and the StarTracker combination. Martin, over to you now.
Excellent. Hello, Mikhail. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Frank. Great to be on this Pixopalooza. Okay, so let me tell you about StarTracker. Some of you have worked with it, and some of you will be new to it. But the StarTracker is our optical camera tracking system, 6 degrees of freedom, real time. It was designed specifically from the ground up for this application. So that is tracking cameras in broadcast and virtual production. We developed it about 8 years ago for this application. It's a very challenging one in the sense that you have to balance the flexibility and ease of use because cameramen and producers want to focus on creating their content, making their productions, not tracking systems. But at the same time, you're working in what's really an unprecedented scale. You could be tracking in aircraft hangar-sized studios. You've got to deal with lighting changes. You have to deal with set changes. Every day, the environment could be different. You can have LED walls, reflections, plain green screens. You're live on air. It's a very challenging environment. So in order to address this, we came up with what you call an inside-out tracking system. So it's an optical system. You have a wide field of view camera, as you can see in the slide, and you attach that to whatever camera you're trying to track. And what we do is we track an artificial star map, which gives us the robustness and reliability we need to track cameras in real time on air. What these are is they're very cheap, simple retroreflective stickers. They're nice and passive, very easy. You just stick them up on the ceiling to any fixed structures. They can be at different heights. You could even stick them down on the floor, for instance, on a vinyl carpet, if you want to do productions outdoor, for instance. And with this, the system is looking to track these, and in effect tracks the constellation of the stickers. So you have a one-time calibration process where you walk around with the StarTracker sensor and it builds up a map automatically of the positions of these stars, and it saves a star map. And from then on, every time you want to track, it's pretty much automatic. You just turn on the system, it sees the constellation, which it illuminates with its infrared LED ring, and then it just tracks automatically. So that gives you the flexibility and ease of use, and it's reliable, and you can just forget that it's there, and it'll just be there tracking for you, allowing you to focus on your productions. We developed that about 8 years ago and patented it, and since then it's been used pretty much by all the major broadcasters such as NEP, ESPN, BBC, and of course the Weather Channel, which we saw some great graphics here with the Future Group, and those had quite an impact. I had a number of friends contacting me, asking me if I had anything to do with that. I think it really made some good waves in the industry. Of course, you can see that you can mount a StarTracker on cranes, on steady cams, on pedestals. It doesn't matter. It gives you that flexibility. So shall we go to the studio? We'll have Marcus in our studio, we'll have a StarTracker, and we'll give you a demonstration of what we mean by some of these robustness characteristics. So there's Marcus in our green screen studio. Hi, Marcus. And he has a StarTracker there mounted on a camera, and you can see what the StarTracker sees on the bottom right. So you can see it's picking up these retroreflective stickers, the stars as we call them. Okay, so the first thing Marcus is going to do is show you that the system's robust to occlusions. So he's going to wave his hand over there, and you can see the system's still tracking optical good. It's robust to occlusions. It doesn't matter because the stickers are small and it's looking at the constellation. As long as it can see some, it can still track. Then Marcus is also going to show you that it's robust to lighting because, of course, if you're working in studios with strong lights shining down, it has to be able to deal with that. Very strong spotlight. You can see it doesn't even appear as a light to the system. It just doesn't care. It's just happily still tracking as we expect. So the next thing Marcus is going to show you is that the system gives you freedom of movement. It's easy to use. So he's going to tilt down and show you that, yes, you can use this with a steady cam. You can use this on jibs and cranes that are going to be tilting and rolling around. He's tilting down 45 degrees. Let's see how much further we can go, Marcus. Still tracking because it's a wide field of view sensor, so it can see, as long as it can see some of these stars, it can still track. And of course, the system has a gyro, so it will still give the angles even if it does lose tracking. And then it will just automatically find itself again when it picks up some stars again. But here you can see we haven't even had to do that. It's only now saying optical unreliable, and he's practically at 90 degrees. So with the StarTracker, you can track wall to wall on all sorts of supports automatically, pretty much. So it really gives you that freedom of movement and makes things much easier. So what we did was we took this system, which works well for general cameras, but in order to make it easy to use, so you don't have to deal with how you're going to mount this to the UE150, we wanted to keep the kind of easy to use, compact, nice ethic of the UE150 and just put a system that creates a complementary system. And this is what it is. So the way it works is the UE150 is giving out D1 protocol to the StarTracker module below, and the StarTracker is automatically doing the calculations to merge in the data and is sending it out to the Pixotope engine, which means that you don't have to concern yourself with combining and fiddling data together. It comes in and it's very easy to use. So I think Mikkel is going to join us in the studio, and I think he's going to tell us more about it. He's going to actually show us what value it actually gives to be able to now move your Panasonic UE150, not just pan and tilt. Over to you, Mikkel.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Now we're in our studio and have a look at the StarTracker UE150. So this is the UE150 from Panasonic, and we sort of modeled it's like a shoe in a way of StarTracker around it, and they become more or less one unit. And what it gives us is the possibility to also track lateral moves. The head itself tracks and can only perform pan and tilt motion. While with the StarTracker UE150, you can as well move laterally. And that actually has a very, very big impact on your production value. And I would like to show you how that works and what the difference is if you just have from a tripod pan and tilt motion compared to the motion laterally when you move left, right, up, down. What does that actually do to our scene and to the production value? Let's have a look. So what you see now is we're panning. Marcus is just panning left and right. And you see that the foreground pillars to the background pillars are actually traveling the same speed. They travel the same speed, and as a result, we don't have an impression for the space. Now do this up and down tilting. It's the same thing. It's just like moving around in a picture. It has something about 2D about it. Now, we will now move the head and show you that it suddenly becomes 3D. So you see, we're moving. Foreground elements move at a different speed to the background elements. And that means we have a sense for space. We're used to this. When we move our head, we know we have a sense for the three-dimensionality of the space we're in. And that allows us to pull our audience into the space and keep the whole thing we're doing much more exciting. The other thing is, if you invest into virtual production, you probably also have invested a lot in either scanning or the photogrammetry or created your space. You invested quite a lot of creativity and time and money into it. So why not show that space? Why just show it on a tripod as a 2D image when you can actually move around in it and it becomes a three-dimensional space? That is what StarTracker enables. You move the camera sideways or up and down, and you're suddenly in a three-dimensional space. This is what we want to drag the viewer into. There's also something else we did, because the logic application would be that you put the UE150 on a crane, on a rail, on a track, or anything that basically moves in your studio, you can put it on. Now, if you want to use it from a crane, you need to start to operate from the back of the crane, the UE150, and it's not designed for that. It hasn't got the inputs that allow you operation from the back of the crane. So what we have done is, we looked around and saw the Jimmy Jib input devices, which is something industry cameramen really, really like the proportions of. And we thought, instead of creating something new, we interfaced to those. And we created an interface box that suddenly allows us to move the camera, the UE150, from the back end of a crane. With easy to access settings. The settings here are, for example, you can change the direction of the pan, change the direction of the tilt. We have what is called soft stops. We can change the speed. We can change the smoothness. All these things a camera operator is used to from other remote control systems. Suddenly we gave that capability to the UE150 here on this Cartoni Jimmy Jib, but you can mount it on any other crane. It doesn't matter how long that crane is. So you suddenly have a high production value system. You move around in your scene and you could get extremely high camera shots out of that you normally would only achieve with a hell of a lot more money. So there are also other ways to operate or move the head. Let's say if you're on a rail, Panasonic has a really cool face recognition system. So you would just swing the crane around and the face recognition system would follow, will make the head follow the anchor. So I think it's a really great combination, and it's amazing working together with Panasonic to make all this possible and make it easier for you. Now, let me sum up quickly what the benefits are, and there are three. One is safety, which means if just before you go on air, somebody kicks the tripod or something gets misaligned, the head is out, the UE150 is just out of its normal position. Then with the StarTracker, it would know where it is. It doesn't matter. You're safe. You can go on air. There will be always alignment between the UE150 and your render engine. The second point is flexibility. You can use your tripod and move it around anywhere in the studio. You can change your perspective, your camera position, without needing to get into the engine and adjust and relocate and tell the system where the UE150 is exactly. Now, and the third point is it gives you creativity. You can suddenly turn your two-dimensional space or two-dimensional appearing space and make it that 3D space that you have invested in, and you can draw your audience into it. So thank you very much for watching, and back over to Frank.
thank you for that very in-detail presentation. So now that we've seen how we can really get the most out of the Panasonic PTZ together with the MoSys StarTracker, we're rapidly approaching the end of today's session. There's been a lot of information to take in. We are about to head into our Q&A session, but before then, please have a glance at this sheet where you can see the different contact people from our respective companies if you're interested in contacting right now and learn more about any of the solutions you've seen or heard about so far today. All right, so now let's get going. So from the top, first question is, can you output the tracking data if you move the PTs horizontally on a track? I suppose that would be a question best answered to MoSys.
Okay.
Yes, it doesn't matter where you mount the StarTracker UE150 on. Anything that moves, it can be on a track, on a rail, try a cable cam, anything that basically moves. Just in our example, we now mounted it on a jib.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. What if we don't have access to MoSys? What if we want to use? What if we want to do everything through a rail solution?
Okay, so yeah, because I put a picture of our solution for the PTZs. That could be the PTZ is on a rail, on a dolly on a rail. That's the system that we call the tuning system. And yes, in that case, the system, this tuning system, gets the data, gets the tracking data from the camera, and it combines with the data horizontal in this case if it's a dolly. So it put all together and it delivers one single stream of data that goes to Pixotope, for example. So yeah, from the engine point of view, you are still receiving one stream of data. So everything is combined in that dolly, or it's also a software behind that. But yeah, it's everything combined there. So at the end, it's all in one stream of data. So yeah, no problem.
Very interesting. So there you have it. But of course, with the MoSys StarTracker, you will have 6 degrees of freedom. You are no longer locked to your trail. Next question.
Also, it does happen sometimes that you would be free to move your rail around and not having to, every time you move a rail, and yes, you may have the data coming out, but you need to tell the studio or your virtual space where the rail is. And either you want to move it or you accidentally kick it, you have to update that into your environment, and that all is gone with the StarTracker. So we have our own rail systems like the Via Dolly, and that has all encoders built in. We're still providing with a special package the StarTracker to our customers in that, because it actually makes our life easier and as well as the customer support is much simpler. StarTracker is so easy to set up, and you just don't need to worry about it anymore where your rail now is inside your studio.
That's very true. Those are some very good points. Not having to worry about losing your configuration or having anything happen to your tracking setup is
exactly
it's very relieving, especially if it's 10 minutes until you go live in front of 50 million people and you realize your tracking is off. For those of you that have been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Next question. This, I believe, is for you, John. Hi, John. I have some detailed questions about the AW UE150 and the UE100, like PTZ cameras, and the integration in Pixotope/Unreal. Some like remote productions via NDI, HX, SRT, or Unreal plugin, etc. How that can be a much shorter question. How can I reach you after the webinar?
where I think yeah, you can put that there. But but here I think I have then a question for you, Frank. Is like if Pixotope supports NDI as a signal or not. This is it's becoming a quite popular question nowadays, especially yeah for remote productions, especially. So I'm not sure if you accept that format as an input.
NDI is on our roadmap and it's coming in the near future.
Yeah.
Because we have also noticed that there is a huge push for NDI these days.
Yes, yes. Yeah, now now also in I didn't talk about that today, but the UE100 is the first PTZ for Panasonic that supports the NDI high bandwidth. It means that very good quality also in 4K. So yeah, I mean, it's now with that development, I mean, the camera will be ready in September. So, but with that, it's starting to make sense. And for some tests that we have made, yeah, the quality is for the render is quite good or quite acceptable in many cases. So yeah, I think it's going to be a frequent question from now on. Yeah.
Yes, very good. And of course, just to reiterate, here you have John's contact information. I just want to know if it is possible to use Pixotope without knowledge about Unreal Engine. That is a surprisingly complex question, but the short answer is yes. At the end of the day, you are going to need to have some kind of graphics. You're going to need to put them within Unreal Engine. But once you have that, even if you simply buy a pre-made set or you outsource the creative process to a creative vendor, at the end of the day, when you have your graphics, you can do all your operations, you can interact with your set, you can trigger actions, you can move objects, you can do more or less everything required for day-to-day operations directly through the Pixotope director. As you can see here, as I'm going to pull it over, if I just didn't have 10 layers of webinar interfaces in the way, good heavens. There we go. Computers are very hard. So here, within the production tab, this is where you as a non-Unreal user will be spending most of your time. So here you can see, this is where you can offset and adjust your objects, mess with the keyer, but also of course do all your complex interactions through our control panels. Next question. Next question is, how many stickers do I need in my studio for the tracking to work and how high should they be? I assume this is a question about the StarTracker, so I'm going to hand that over to you, Martin.
Yeah, excellent. So basically, the system needs to see around 11 or so stickers minimum for tracking to make sure that the constellation's unique. But generally, if you have 30 or more stickers, which isn't difficult to get, it's surprisingly easy, then you can have good tracking. We have a guide. So in general, the system can, of course, track stickers of various sizes. So of course, you could have like 2 stickers of various sizes, but we have a guide in general as to what size and what kind of spacing to have. I think we generally tend to have them spaced on average about 1/10 of the height from the floor to the ceiling. In our studio, which I think is around 3.5 meters, we would be looking at something like, I think we have them around 40 centimeters or so spaced out. And I think for the floor facing ones, we tend to have something similar, 20 to 30 centimeters apart is good. But it's the system's very flexible to that. It's very kind of permissive. So if it looks reasonable, it can track off it.
But Martin, it's to be said that that was the minimum required, but it's actually every single sticker or star is actually increasing the accuracy, and also if they're on different levels. So just there's no need just to have the minimum, just put as many, and they're just little stickers. So this means that was actually the whole idea of what we were trying to achieve, to have something that doesn't need constructions and support systems, something that can be easily just stuck onto the ceiling in no time and be small. It doesn't have any barcodes or information. It's small and therefore it can be easily stuck anywhere. It's in nobody's way either. They never get dirty because dust is falling down and not back up to them. They stay operational for years.
Very good. So that was a very fulfilling answer. So now we know that. The next question, though, is, let's see here. Next question is, how are occlusions managed? Now, that could refer to a lot of things. If you're talking about things like ambient occlusion, that's of course simply a render feature within Pixotope that you just turn on and off. If you're talking about having something in front of, for instance, AR within Pixotope, that is sorted by what we call holdout geometry. So let's say, for instance, that you have a chair in front of AR graphics or a desk. Maybe you want to have AR behind a presenter desk. Then you would make a 3D model of this desk within Pixotope, right-click it, convert it to a holdout, and now this is going to hide and mask out your AR. I'm not sure if occlusions is something that makes sense to you guys in MoSys in terms of tracking devices.
It could, because there are other tracking systems that are more prone to sort of occlusions. And the nice thing about StarTracker is you have those little stickers and you have plenty of. That means they can be occluded somewhere, but then other ones reveal. And that's so it's like a coming and going of those reference points. So if that was meant with occlusion, no, occlusions are much less a problem than with other types of systems, other types of optical systems.
Very good. So that was a very vague question, but I think we answered every possible interpretation of it I could think of. Next question to Jaume. Which are the main differences between the UE100 and the UE150 camera models?
Okay, the main difference is related to the sensor side. So the UE100 is a smaller camera, so it means a smaller sensor. And for example, a smaller dynamic range. So that's why when in my slide, when I talk about HDR and VLOC, which are two functions that you have in Pixotope, for example, and as you have demonstrated, is a very useful functions to increase the quality of the render. These you can, I mean, these two functions are related to the dynamic range of the camera, again, is on the sensor. So, for example, in that sense, the UE150 will perform much better because the UE150 will remain as the top camera. So the UE100 will not have such dynamic range as the UE150. So in terms of, let's say, picture quality, sensitivity, dynamic range, the 150, it's in fact it's a camera that is being compared a lot with bigger cameras like studio cameras and so on, and it's a camera that performs really well. The 100 can be a good companion, but I would say that it depends a bit on the application, on the expected quality, on the I mean, and the conditions of the place. So it's not the same a studio with a good lighting than going to a live music concert where everything is darker, for example. So we have to think in those aspects, and it's important to know at the end what is the expected quality. But I would say that these two things are important. Also, other things, but this isn't Mainly, this is basically because this camera is new and the technology is advancing more and more. Is that the UE100 is going to support this NDI full bandwidth, and also another protocol which is SRT, which is also quite convenient for remote productions when using internet as our connection network. So. But this is something that when we release a new camera, technology has advanced, and now you will have these functions in the 100 only. So it's we have to find a balance between both cameras. Of course, the 100 is going to be a bit cheaper. Also, the combination of both, we can have maybe one main camera, 150. 100s on the sides, maybe as a total system. So, but of course, the camera will be ready in September, so I cannot be more precise on that. We will try to make proper recommendations when the time comes.
Very good. The next question is, how can you decide if a real character have to be in front or in the back of a virtual object? First of all, in order for a real person to be in front of virtual graphics, you're going to need some way to make a key. This is not necessary for a static object, because a static object we can recreate in 3D and use as a holdout. But we cannot do that for a person, because persons tend to move around and be shifting in shape, so we need a key. So the first thing you're going to do is probably put your talent on a green screen. Now you have a key and a fill. The way we handle this within Pixotope, let's actually take a look at that right now. Now we don't have a green screen here, but we can simply use a placeholder texture. So let's just jump into our virtual scene here. We're going to fire this up in the editor. But the short version is basically that we take our key and fill, we project it from the point of view of the tracked camera onto a plane that we call our internal composition plane. So we can see here we have a virtual set. We are going to just go ahead and position a talent up on stage. Let's see here. It's going to be Pierre. That's going to have to be our stand-in, as always. That's what you get for volunteering to become a debug texture. So we go see here, we pull in a virtual composition plane. Right now we are projecting our video feed, which isn't really that useful because again, it's not being keyed. So I'm going to go to world settings, enable debug video. Here's Pierre standing patiently as he has done for thousands of years. On a side note, the fact that we are projecting our talent onto 3D geometry is also why we're able to do things like reflect our talent in virtual graphics, as well as cast shadows from a real person on virtual graphics. So now that our person is in here, and from the point of view of the camera existing in the 3D space, now it's very easy to define if something is going to be in front or behind, because everything exists together in 3D space, as opposed to more old-fashioned ways of doing this. We don't have to define this is a foreground actor or this is a background actor. There is no foreground background. Everything exists in a 3D space. If I want this cube to be in front of my person, all I have to make sure of is that the cube is in front of the person, because everything exists in a 3D space, as you can see here. So again, to summarize, you're going to need a green screen, so you can have a chroma key, so you can have a way of cutting out your talent, your person, and then you simply put geometries in front and behind, and the rest is going to sort itself out. Lastly, if you want to build upon this, if you want your person to be able to walk around freely, walk behind and walk in front of geometries, then you also need some way of tracking your person, of which there are quite a few different solutions on the market.
Can I add to this, Frank?
Yes.
Because we also have several possibilities to track people. I think it's about 4 different ways, and it's all about budget, how many people, what precision you need and what do you need, just position, or do you need the angles as well. To start with, you can add StarTracker, where we have a very small version, and you put that on the back, for example, of a person. This is really good for when you track people in motion capture. And one of the best ways with the least amount of noise, and you don't need to clean it up afterwards, is these tracking suits, where you have inertial measurements. And those suits are, I mean, they can even sort of register the breathing of a person and stuff like that. So, but they have one problem, that they lose their position, and they calculate the position just by step and the direction of a person. And you can imagine you can't be very precise over time, and you will sort of lose. So in that case, we add a StarTracker to the back of the person, and that locks them in space, and you can have person tracking throughout the biggest stage at very little cost. Now, the number two, we have radio tracking, and that radio is you put some beacons in the studio. It's a bit a crude way, but it's a really low cost way of tracking people, for 40 people and more. And it's really useful when you have, for example, a virtual character wanting to keep eyesight with a real character. Another way we offer tracking is and we collaborate with OptiTrack on that. You basically use LED, blinking LEDs, and there's a very precise way of doing that. You can do object tracking as well. It doesn't happen that often, but that's why we work together with somebody else.
Very good. And just to, as a final addendum to that, in order for a person to be allowed to walk freely around using Pixotope and a green screen, the only thing we really need is the position of that person. We don't care about his rotation or multiple samplings. We just need to know where is his center mass, which by the sounds of it, MoSys could solve in multiple different ways. So next question, let us see here. The next question is for Martin, as a matter of fact. Is it possible to use StarTracker outdoors? Is there a way to use it in a portable kit, for instance, together with Pixotope Mobile?
Yeah, so one of the ways is to have, for instance, a vinyl carpet that you can just roll out. So you would do a one-time just sticking the stickers onto this carpet. We've even done it on a fake grass kind of carpet. And we stuck the stickers on that for pitch side work. And you do your one-time mapping process, and then from then on you just travel around. Maybe you're traveling around because you're covering football matches or otherwise, and then you just lay out your vinyl carpet, turn on the system, and it immediately recognizes where it is and starts tracking. Another way to do it is to have a net, for instance. For some reason you may want to put the stickers above rather than on the ground, and then you could erect some kind of marquee structure, for instance, tent-like structures, anything. We sometimes use butterfly nets, for instance, at trade shows, and they are like these thin black kind of mesh, very lightweight, to keep butterflies out of hedges. And we just stick the stickers to that, and then you can track with that. For instance, sunlight isn't a problem. I think we pointed the sensor in the sun during summer weather last year, and it gets filtered out. It just appears as a white circle to the unit.
Very good. Let's see, I believe I might actually have skipped a question here. Let's see. Yes. Does it require a calibration when you combine the PTZ camera and the MoSys tracking hub? And if that is the case, how long does the calibration process take? Thank you.
So we have a calibration that's what we call a kind of auto aligner. It's a kind of through the lens to try to get the most precise alignment possible. And it's very quick. We've done it in something like 10 minutes. I think this is a topic we'd like to do a webinar on in the future to show exactly what this process involves. But in general, it will probably work even without doing this. So the StarTracker we calibrate to give the position, of course, at the pivot point of the UE150 camera. So you get it at the camera, and in general, because that's generally the easiest way to calibrate through the lens. So that will give you your map offsets, your map scale, and your camera offsets and so on. We tend to do that because it's very easy. And so what you're basically doing is you're picking up, you're measuring out, say, 3 points in the studio, and we have a kind of triangle kit designed for that to make that very easy. And then you're going to point the camera at the center of the camera at each of those points in turn and move it around the studio, and you press a button, and then it basically gives you a alignment from that, and that's a one-time process. So it's a very straightforward. We also have several other ways of doing it, but broadly it's a quick, easy process. So you're talking about, you're not going to be there all day, you're talking 10 minutes, maybe half an hour at most. It's that kind of time period rather than, you know, struggling away. And of course it's also not a dark art process. So if you're, for instance, having to do manual offsets and tweaking, it's very hit and miss and you can be there all day, but we have a deterministic process for doing these offsets. That's very quick and easy.
Very good. The next question is for Joey. The question is as follows. Will tracking data be integrated into SRT or NDI in future updates? The reason I ask is because the current solution might have some challenges with different timings.
Yeah. Yeah, we are considering right now. I cannot be more specific because this, well, SRT is also, we are talking about a camera available in September. But yes, I mean, again, the same question as before with NDI. We are receiving a lot of questions about that. I understand that this remote production is getting more and more important and necessary nowadays. So yeah, at this moment, SRT at this moment, how it's implemented is only video. So the control goes over IP separately. In case of NDI, it's part of that. But yeah, we are considering how to embed or how to put everything together so that we don't lose the synchronization. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, we are considering, our factory is considering, and cannot be more precise on when or how, but yeah, we understand the requirement. It cannot be the video on one side and the tracking on the other, because then we lose the synchronization. So we are considering, and I'm quite sure that we will find a way of putting both things together. So probably kind of firmware upgrade for the cameras in the next months. So at this moment, no, at this moment is not linked. So we have to ensure that, yeah, that there is no big issues with the delays on the network. You have to be a bit careful with that. Yeah.
Very good. To just add upon that, synchronization is, as we all know, always going to be a challenge when you're dealing with two separate data feeds, tracking and video. And we had a cursory glance on this earlier, but just to reiterate, within Pixotope, you can have your video and your tracking data synced within a matter of seconds using our sync offset panel, where you can easily offset frames on your tracking and video input as well as the final output. So no matter how many frames of delay offset you have, with just a few snap pans and snap zooms, eyeballing it and adding and removing frames, you can be in sync just like that. So you can see here, for instance, we are 3 frames off, and that's fine. We simply input a frame offset here, and now we have sync. Very, very simple. Next question. Will there be an integrated version of the AWUE100 with StarTracker as well? So that's actually a question for both of you. Whoever wants to jump on that first?
I think the answer is yes, but yeah, I mean, we are also discussing with MoSys. They got some initial drawings, but yeah, I mean, at the time that the camera is available, I'm quite sure that it will be compatible. But we are working on it, and still we have 2-3 months. So yeah, I'm quite sure that it's going to be possible, but MoSys can confirm.
Yes, I believe it's straight off compatible, and it would be very similar. And I think, yeah, it's mostly mechanical. So I think the head has a slightly different footprint to the UE150. So the StarTracker base module would be slightly different for that. But otherwise, I think it's compatible. And yes, it likely will do around the time the head comes out.
Excellent. All right. Let's see here. The next question is, so this is a follow-up question to the character tracking. So the real character is stuck to or will only be able to move along a single plane. Is it not possible to track the position of the talent and make him walk behind and at the back of an object? This is absolutely available, possible. We have covered this in previous Pixopalooza sessions, as well as some of the material from last year's NAB. But the answer is more or less what our friends at MoSys just pointed out. You have your plane, you have your person, you get the 3D position of your person by tracking him, you feed this data to your plane, and now your plane is able to move around freely. Of course, the plane will always be facing the camera, so we don't have to worry about rotation. So it doesn't matter how you get it, but if you're able to get the 3D position of your talent into Pixotope, we can use that to offset our composite plane. Also worth keeping in mind that we are projecting onto a composite plane because that's the most typical use case, but the composition plane can be any shape. There are use cases where if you're using a Steadicam, for instance, and need to be able to more dynamically move around a person on a green screen, you might want to use a cylinder or some other kind of geometric shape instead. Okay, I think we have now more or less covered all of our questions. If you have further inquiries about things like pricing information or more specifications about models, please do not hesitate to reach out to the respective representatives from our different companies. You can see their information in the screen share down below. And I think this is more or less what we had time for today. So on that note, I'm going to say my final thank yous to everyone from MoSys, as well as Jomi from Panasonic. Thank you for joining us here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, pleasure.
And to all of
Bye,
you viewing
everybody.
from home, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Until next time.